Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, where we take up important articles of the day from the newspaper and discuss them in detail as per the demands of Civil Services exam. Articles covered today are displayed on your screen and their notes in PDF and Word format are provided in the description box down below. Without further ado, let us begin. Now starting off with the first article of the day, which appeared on Indian Express on July the 3rd of this month. This article reports that Association for Democratic Reforms, which is an independent electoral watchdog, it recently wrote to the Election Commission of India seeking action against political parties that have failed to publish details of criminal antecedents of their election candidates. Now, this news holds significance because criminalization of politics has been an issue in Indian electoral system, and it alters the functioning of the legislatures respectively, which is important from GS paper 2 point of view. Also, in previous year question of mains 2021, a question appeared on what extent has parliament been able to ensure accountability of executive in India, and criminalization of politics, it affects the ability of parliament to ensure accountability of the executive. Hence, in the scope of today's discussion, first we will take a look at reasons that are behind increasing criminalization in Indian politics. Then, we will discuss the impact of criminalization, followed by notable Supreme Court judgments that have tried to deal with the menace of criminalization. Further, we will take a look at limitations that the Election Commission of India faces in dealing with criminalization, followed by a way forward that will incorporate suggestions made by Law Commission and Supreme Courts in this regard. Now, Association for Democratic Reforms or ADR highlighted that in 2019 elections, 43% winners to the Lok Sabha in India have declared criminal charges against them, and 29% of them have declared serious criminal charges. And an ADR's analysis, it shows that criminals who face criminal charges have double the chance of winning an election when you compare them with that of clean candidates. Hence, let us start off today's discussion by discussing the reasons that are behind increasing criminalization. Now, the first reason that promotes increasing criminalization of politics is that criminals provide muscle power to political parties, and this muscle power enables the political parties to secure their vote banks and also try to intimidate the vote bank of another political party. Further, these criminals provide political parties with money power that helps them deal with huge election expenditures. Further, there's low awareness among voters about history, qualification, and criminal cases that are against politicians, and hence, these voters, without caring about politicians' criminal cases, decide to vote in favor of them. Further, there is a lack of comprehensive legislation which can regulate or de-recognize political parties who encourage such criminalization. Also, the audited accounts of political parties are not available for open inspection. Hence, they can even get and hide money which are provided to them by criminals. Also, there are lack of structural and organizational reforms in Indian political party, which has led to absence of inner party democracy, and this inhibits the transparency and promotion of clean candidates in electoral system of our country. Now, after discussing the reasons for criminalization, let us take a look at what is the impact of criminalization on Indian politics. The first and the most critical impact has been that it undermines the sanctity of Indian Parliament because the lawbreakers get elected and hence they become lawmakers. The second impact is that there has been a loss of faith in Indian judiciary because Indian judiciary has been unable to curb the criminalization in Indian politics. These criminals, influencing their political power, are able to delay the hearings
and obtain repeated adjournments and intimidate witnesses, which can stall any meaningful progress in delivering of justice. Further, criminalization has tainted the Indian democracy, which we can see as the rule of law is being weakly enforced and has created rampant social divisions in our country. Also, criminalization affects the efficiency of Indian parliament because the criminals they cause frequent disruptions in the functioning of Indian parliament. Also, criminalization is self-perpetuating in nature because political parties focuses on winnability of candidates rather than their clean record. Also, it has resulted into undertaking of personal welfare by these criminals, which comes at a cost of public welfare. And this has resulted into menace of crony capitalism and underutilization of MP or MLA funds. To deal with criminalization, Supreme Court has given certain judgments, and these judgments have become critical to clean the Indian politics. Let us take a look at these judgments in the next slide. The first notable judgment in this regard is Union of India versus ADR case of the year 2002. In this, the Supreme Court declared that the candidates should disclose their assets and liabilities, criminal convictions, and pending cases at the time of nomination. While in the Lily Thomas case of the year 2013, the Supreme Court highlighted that a sitting MP or MLA who has been convicted for a jail term which is more than of 2 years would lose their seat in the legislature immediately after the judgment comes into force. Further, in the Public Union of Civil Liberties versus Union of India case of the year 2014, the Supreme Court introduced a nota option, and this option has been able to put moral pressure on political parties to put up clean candidates. Further, in the Public Interest Foundation versus Union of India case of the year 2014, the Supreme Court held that the trial courts should complete the trial of cases which involves the legislator within a period of 1 year itself. Also, in Lok Prahari versus Union of India case of the year 2018, the Supreme Court made it mandatory for disclosure of source of income of candidates. Also, the candidate should declare the source of income for dependents and their known associates. However, the most notable case in this regard came in 2018, and this case has been discussed in detail in the scope of today's article. This case was Public Interest Foundation case of the year 2018. In this case, the Supreme Court made it mandatory for political parties to publish the details of criminal cases which are pending against their candidates. And these details should be published on websites of a political party in a format which has been prescribed by Election Commission of India. While candidates have declared the cases which are pending against them in election affidavits to the Election Commission of India even before the ruling, this Supreme Court order made it mandatory for information to be widely publicized. It directed political parties to publish the details of criminal cases which are pending against the candidates in bold letters and told the candidates with pending cases to inform the political party about these cases. Also, the court had ordered the candidate and the party to publish the information at least 3 times after filing the nomination. Also, the parties need to declare the reasons so as to why they have selected a particular candidate. And these reasons should include qualifications, achievements, and merits of candidates concerned, and not mere the factor of winnability. The court said that the information regarding criminal cases which are pending against the candidates needs to be published in one vernacular newspaper, one national newspaper, and on official social media platforms of the political parties within a period of 48 hours of selection and not less than 2 weeks before the first date of nomination. The parties will then have to submit a compliance report to the Election Commission of India within a period of 72 hours. Now, let us discuss the limitations that the Election Commission of India faces in tackling the menace of criminalization. The first limitation is that monitoring of compliance of such judgment requires a large-scale infrastructure, which is absent with Election Commission of India. Further, there is a need for huge manpower, which the Election Commission of India currently lacks. Also, Election Commission of India does not have any power to disqualify candidates prior to their conviction, as the Section 8 of RPA 1951 deals with disqualification only after a person is convicted for certain offences. They cannot be disqualified before conviction. Further, the false affidavits has not been included as a grounds for challenging the election or for rejection of nomination paper under the Section 8 of Representation of People Act. In this article, the news highlights that the Association for Democratic Reforms has mentioned that many political parties do not have a functional websites, which is required to publish the information, and the parties who have a functional website have not maintained any information or has inaccessible website links. Also, the Supreme Court had said that the party cannot use the winnability as a reason for selecting candidates with criminal antecedents. And this news highlights that the parties are citing the chance of winning and popularity of a person as among reasons, and they are copy pasting such similar justifications for multiple candidates. Hence, there are few suggestions that both Election Commission of India and political parties which they need to inculcate in order to curb this menace of criminalization of politics. What are these suggestions? Let us take a look in the next slide. The first and most important suggestion comes in a form of need to curb the high cost of election campaigning, which is at the heart of criminalization of politics, as political parties need huge election expenditures in order to have a competitive chance, and these expenditures are provided by criminals in form of illicit funds. Hence, there is a need to curb these high costs. Further, the Law Commission of India has given several recommendations. First of which is the need to disqualify the tainted politicians at the stage of framing of charges itself. However, this should be made with adequate safeguards. Also, the filing of false affidavits by candidates should amount to corrupt practices, as conviction on charge of filing false affidavits should be made a ground for disqualification under the Representation of People Act of year 1951. Also, the Supreme Court had made several observations, which include that the Parliament must make a law to ensure that persons who face serious criminal charges they do not enter into political stream. Also, the Supreme Court had highlighted that political parties must make it necessary to introduce internal democracy, financial transparency, and accountability in their working itself. Also, there are recommendations to amend the Representation of People Act, which needs to introduce enhanced sentences for filing of false affidavits. Further, there is a need to set up an independent method for verification of winners' affidavits, which can be done in order to check the incidences of filing false disclosures, and this needs to be done in a speedy manner. Also, there is a need to bar candidates who are charged with cognizable offence from contesting elections at the stage when charges are framed by a competent court. Also, there is a need to expedite trials in relevant courts where cases have been filed against sitting members, and this should be done with an outer limit of completing the trial within 1 year. Hence, the criminalization of politics can be controlled by curbing the high cost of campaigning, disqualification of tainted politicians, making a parliamentary law that should disqualify these tainted candidates, amending the Representation of People Act by making false affidavits punishable, and having an independent verification method for monitoring the candidates' affidavits. And hence, This will be able to curb the menace of criminalization of politics. This was all for today's discussion on criminalization of Indian politics. Now moving on to the next article of the day, which appeared in Explain section of Indian Express on July the 5th. Now this article reports that the government last week gave an approval for National Research Foundation or the NRF. And this foundation has the potential to single-handedly address a whole range of deficiencies in India's scientific research center that have been flagged for years now. As India is among the leading countries with deep scientific abilities because India has a huge pool of science and engineering graduates. Also, India has a large network of laboratories and research institutions and sees an active involvement in some of the frontline areas of scientific research. However, in comparative terms, India lags behind several countries in variety of indicators. Hence, this article is important from GS Paper 3 point of view, which deals with science and technologies and its development with effects in our everyday life. Also, in the mains of the year 2014, a question appeared on the reason why scientific research in Indian universities have been declining. Hence, in the scope of today's discussion, we will discuss this article, especially with an outlook of covering the expenditure of India on research and development, as well as the stats that highlight the number of research in Indian universities. Further, we will discuss statistics with respect to research outputs, publication and patents before taking a brief overview of what is a National Research Foundation. Now, India lags behind several countries which are on variety of research indicators, primary among which is the money that India spends on research and development activities. For more than 2 decades now, the central government has a stated objective, that is to allocate at least 2% of its GDP on research activities. However, this objective has not been met. Rather, the expenditure on research and development as a percentage of its GDP has gone down from about 0.76% in the start of previous decade to about 0.64% in the end of 2020-21. And for about half of the last decade, this share has remained stagnant. However, this does not mean that the money for research has not been increased. The spending on research has more than tripled in the last 15 years or so, from about 40,000 crores in 2007-8 to about 1.27 lakh crores in about 2020 to 21. However, India's GDP has grown at a faster rate. Hence, the percentage of share with respect to its GDP in the research activities has gone down. Now, according to a 2021 UNESCO science report, at least 37 countries spend more than 1% of its GDP on research and development activities, and 15 of these 37 countries spend more than 2%. Globally, the average of spending for R&D activities is about 1.79% of GDP. However, when you compare the similar trend with that of India, India is even below the global average with 0.64% of its GDP. Now, India's total expenditure in research and development in terms of purchasing power parity is the 6th highest in the world, after US, China, Japan, Germany and South Korea. However, now India remains far behind when you compare data of that of US and China, who spend more than $500 billion annually. Also, India spent about $42 per researcher in the year of 2020, which is very less when you compare the similar data with that of Israel, who has more than $2,100 per researcher, and US, who spends about $2,200 per researcher. Moreover, women in India comprise about 80% of total scientific researchers, whereas globally, this number is higher at 33%. Hence, these are the indicators that India lags behind in terms of research and development activities. Now, let us take a look at research in universities. Now, India has nearly 40,000 institutions of higher education, most of which are colleges, and more than 1200 of these are fully fledged universities. However, only 1% of these universities engage in active research. And when you compare this data with other countries, it is a common knowledge that in most of the leading countries, universities are centers of research and development activities. Now, let us consider the research output. Now, as you can see from this graph, India has produced more than 40,000 doctorates in the year of 2018, of which nearly 24.5 thousand are doctorates from science and engineering disciplines. And this is 59.97% of overall doctorates when you compare it with other countries. And this puts India at the 7th rank all over the globe. However, even in absolute terms, India's output in science and research doctrines are right at the top, with only US, China, and United Kingdom producing more. However, because of India's large population, this data is not impressive in proportional terms, because the number of researchers per million in India is that of 262, which is even low when you compare it with developing countries like that of Brazil, South Africa, and Mexico. Now let us deal with data related to publication and patents. And the data from Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, the data shows that Indian researchers published around 1.5 lakh articles in science and engineering journals all across the world in the year of 2020, which is almost 2.5 times more than a decade earlier. However, it only constitutes about 5% of all articles published globally, whereas Chinese researchers, on the other hand, contributed about 23% of articles, whereas US accounted for about 15.5% of articles. Hence, you can see that India clearly lags behind these two countries. While in the year 2021, a data which signifies patent filed across the country, it highlights that India filed a total of 61,573 patents, which makes India 6th largest in the world. However, this is nowhere close to nearly 16 lakhs patent which was filed in China and about 6 lakhs patent which was filed in United States this year. Hence, we have seen the data puts India behind many developed and developing countries around the world. And in this regard, the National Research Foundation becomes important. Hence, in the next slide, let us take a look at brief objectives of National Research Foundation. Now, National Research Foundation, if implemented, has the potential to address most pressing issues in Indian science and significantly improve India's research output. The NRF is supposed to fund, promote, and mentor research in higher educational institutions. And there are a number of ways in which NRF is expected to improve the environment of scientific research in the community. One of the main objectives of NRF is to broad base the research climate in the country, which is by getting the colleges and universities involved in scientific research. The NRF detailed project report has pointed out that less than 1% of nearly 40,000 institutions in the country are currently engaged in research. And NRF plans to address this lacuna in multiple ways. Active researchers, who are whether serving or retired, can be encouraged to take up NRF professorships at universities and colleges to start with. And they will improve the research cells in these universities with collaboration with existing faculties. There will be no age barrier for research of such mentors, and they can apply for funding as long as they are active and bring value to host institutions. It also plans to offer doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships to young researchers at these universities. University professors and researchers will get an opportunity to participate in long term projects aimed specifically at solving societal problems. Further, NRF would promote research in social sciences, as it would fund and promote research not just in natural sciences but also in subjects such as humanities, social sciences, and art, which is considered vital for inculcating creativity, critical thinking, and communication skills. Further, the NRF plans to address the national priorities, which includes areas such as clean energy, climate change, sustainable infrastructure, improved transportation, and accessible and affordable healthcare. And the core objective of the NRF would be to sharply increase the funding which is available to the scientific research community in India, both for government and from private sources. And it aims to direct the amount available for research in India to improve the quality and quantity of research output. The estimated allocation of about 50,000 crores for a 5-year period is likely to go up once the NRF starts to make it mark. Hence, by broad basing the research in the country by introducing professorship, fellowship, and long term projects, as well as inculcating research in social sciences and addressing national priorities, the NRF aims to address the lacunas in R&D infrastructure and manpower in the country. This was all for today's discussion on National Research Foundation. Now moving on to the third article of the day, which appeared in Explain section of the Indian Express on July the 7th of this month. India, which has hosted the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Council of Heads meeting, and it marks India's inaugural chairmanship of the summit. And this news is important from GS Paper 2 point of view, which highlights bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements which involve India and they affect India's interest. Also, SEO is important from exams point of view, which you can see from this previous year question of the mains of 2021, which asks us to critically examine the aims and objective of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Further, such multilateral groupings and India's membership in it is important from prelims point of view, which is apparent from this 2022 prelims question. Hence, in the scope of today's discussion, we will first take a brief overview about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Then, we will discuss the significance of Iran's membership vis-a-vis India's interest. Further, we will discuss whether this organization offers diminishing return with respect to India before discussing a way forward in order to maximize India's membership with furthering its national interest with respect to this organization. Hence, let us start off today's discussion about discussing what is a Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is an intergovernmental organization, and it is an organization which is permanent in nature. This organization was announced in the year of 2001 in the city of Shanghai, which is in China. The organization has evolved from Shanghai 5 mechanism, which was established in the year of 1996 through border demarcation and demilitarization talks between the former Soviet republics and China. Now, prior to the formation of SCO in the year of 2001, Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and Tajikistan were members of Shanghai 5. Later, in 2001, Uzbekistan joined this organization and it led to renaming of Shanghai 5 as Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India and Pakistan became its member in the year of 2017, and in September of 2021, Iran became a full member. Now, the SCO currently consists of 9 members, which include Pakistan, India, China, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Russia, Kyrgyzstan, and Iran. Now, the organization also has 3 observer states, which includes Afghanistan, Belarus, and Mongolia. Further, there are 6 dialogue partners of SCO, which include Azerbaijan, Armenia, Cambodia, Nepal, Turkey, and Sri Lanka. Now, as we saw that in September 2021, Iran was granted membership of the SCO. Hence, Iran is the newest member of this organization. Now, Iran has been an observer in SCO since the year 2005, and almost after 15 years, its bid for full permanent membership in this organization was approved in 2021 summit in Dushanbe. A formal MOU with Iran was signed in a summit which was held in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. Now, the SCO's recent focus has shifted towards regional connectivity, and in this regard, Iran's membership is crucial. Also, for India, which has its connectivity strategy through Chabahar Port and international north-south corridor, hence, India sees Iran's inclusion as a significant milestone. Now, Iran's presence in the SCO supports India's effort to bypass the land based trade route which flows through Pakistan, and it has impeded transit trade for India. Further, the potential for double landlocked countries in Central Asian states such as Uzbekistan and Tajikistan to establish a multimodal trade route via Afghanistan will now be encouraged by Iran's membership. Further, Iran's inclusion in SCO allows India to engage in regional trade while avoiding China's Belt and Road Initiative. Additionally, Iran's historical partnership with India and its shared struggle against terrorism, which is originating from Pakistan and Afghanistan, strengthens India's stance against terror safe havens. And in this regard, Iran's membership of the SCO is important from India's point of view. However, despite such significance, India is facing diminishing returns from this organization, and it has brought several challenges for India. Let us take a look at these challenges in the next slide. Now, the challenges include that there is a limited consensus and unendorsed agreements in the SCO. While SCO members have achieved consensus on New Delhi Declaration and joint statements on radicalization and digital transformation, India as a chair was unable to forge agreement on other matters, which included formalizing English as a SCO language and endorsing a roadmap on economic cooperation, which was likely due to concerns about China's influence. Further, there are conflicts among existing members, as the SCO currently consists of 9 members. And these conflicts between the member countries include border issues between India and China, state sponsored terrorism, which is causing tension between India and Pakistan, border issues which are between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and instability in border areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Further, China's rise has led to external pressures in the SCO organization, as China is increasing its influence in Inner Asia, which has led to external pressure from other powers such as United States, which is seeking to contain China's rise, and this has put additional pressure on Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Further, there are limited institutional mechanisms and divergent interests. The SCO currently, it lacks formal decision making and enforcement powers, which limits its governance effectiveness. Member states, they have different political systems, economic models, and strategic priorities, which is leading to internal conflicts and disagreements between the organization. Further, there is limited geographical scope of this organization, and hence it has been subjected to Western criticism. The SCO's focus is on Eurasia and its neighboring region, which restricts its ability with global issues. Now, Western countries are criticizing this organization for lack of democratic credentials, supporting authoritarian regimes, and internal conflicts. Also, Iran's induction has brought several challenges as well. While Iran's induction, prima facie, aligns with India's interest, there are potential challenges as well. The first is that SCO has been increasingly seen as an anti-West forum, as both Russia and Iran are under Western sanctions. Further, US has accused Iran of supplying weapons to Russia, which has further contributed the anti-West perception. And this situation has presented a dilemma for India, which needs to manage its relationship with the West and Russia respectively. Hence, what should be the way forward for India in order to maximize its interest with respect to SCO's membership? Let us take a look in the next slide. The first way forward for India is to enhance its connectivity with Central Asian republics, as India should focus on improving connectivity with Central Asia by utilizing Chabahar port and becoming a part of Ashgabat agreement, as this will help India's presence in Eurasia. Additionally, an emphasis should be placed on utilizing the international North-South corridor for enhancing the regional connectivity. Hence, it is important to prioritize the initiatives that facilitate cooperations such as infrastructure projects. Further, there is a need to maintain peaceful coexistence between both India and China. For Asian century to be truly realized, India and China must coexist peacefully. Hence, both nations should work towards maintaining a harmonious relation and foster cooperation for both of their mutual benefit. Also, there is a need to further economic cooperation and energy security. As the SCO, it provides a platform for India to enhance economic cooperation with resource rich Central Asian countries. And India aims to diversify its economic partnership and taps Central Asia's oil and gas reserve for its energy security. Also, as we saw during Russian-Ukraine conflict, India has benefited from fertilizer and fuel purchases from Russia as well. Also, there is an inherent need to strengthen the fight against terrorism. Given the increasing terrorist activities, it is crucial for SCO countries to develop a cooperative and sustainable security framework. Hence, efforts should be made to enhance the effectiveness of regional anti-terrorist structure or RATS for enabling better collaboration in combating terrorism. Hence, by enhancing its connectivity with Central Asia, maintaining peaceful coexistence with China, furthering its economic cooperation and energy security requirements, and strengthening the fight against terrorism, India can maximize the use of its membership for furthering its national interest. This was all for today's discussion on Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now moving on to the last article of the day, which appeared in the Explain section of the Indian Express on July the 7th of this month. The Reserve Bank of India, in its latest circular, has made a proposal that will allow the customers to change their debit, prepaid and credit card networks. Hence, from October the 1st, the credit card, debit card and prepaid card customers will be able to port their networks. Hence, in the scope of today's discussion, we will first take a look at what are these credit card networks. Then, we will discuss the proposal of RBI which facilitates portability of card networks. In the end, we will discuss the reason which are behind such a proposal. Now, let us start our today's discussion with what are card networks. Now, what do card networks do? These card networks, they provide a centralized communication system that the card users like banks and non-banks utilize to process card transactions. The networks and issuers, they authorize transactions using this network and move payments between customers and businesses through their bank accounts. Now, major card providers include Visa, MasterCard, American Express and RuPay. For example, as you can see from this card here, HSBC is a bank which is a card issuer and it utilizes the payment processing system of card network that is Visa. And these networks such as Visa, they charge commission which is in a form of percentage of a transaction. For example, if a payment is made worth rupees 100, these service providers they utilize a certain percentage of transaction such as 2%. For example, 2 rupees from this transaction goes to Visa. Now, what is the proposal of RBI? Let us take a look in the next slide. Now, the central bank, that is RBI, it has found that it is necessary and expedient in interest of payment system and public interest to provide more choice to customers. And hence, accordingly, the RBI had made following proposals in its draft circular. These proposals include that card issuers shall not enter into any exclusive agreements with card networks that restrains them from availing services of another card network. Also, card issuers shall issue cards across more than one networks. Also, card issuers shall provide option for their customers in order to choose any one among the multiple card networks. And this option may be exercised by customers either at the time of issue or at any subsequent time. Now, what is the intention of RBI in passing such a proposal? First, under existing agreements, bank they issue debit, prepaid or credit cards with a choice of affiliated network for a card which is decided by the card issuer or the bank itself. Now many banks they have exclusive tie-ups which are informal in nature with card networks to offer their services whether customers prefer them or not. And it has been observed that such arrangements are not conducive to availability of choice to customers. And some banks have been forcefully asking customers to accept a particular card network. And this proposal gives the customer the choice to choose their preferred card networks. Also, such a proposal aims to increase the market competition, as the card networks now will have to compete against each other in order to gain payments from customers, and it will force them to reduce the commission charges which they charge for payment processing services. Hence, this will lower the cost for banks and for customers respectively. This was all for today's discussion on portability of card networks.